I was born in London on August 17th, 1937. My mother's name is Mona Tanner. Her maiden name was Mona Green. My father is William Tanner, and my mother was a homemaker, and my father was an engineer. But he was also full-time in the British Army. I have one brother and one sister. His name is Jack. Her name is Molly. I have a deceased brother. His name was Bill. Both of them live in the county of Kent in southern England, just south of London. Yes, we keep in touch, usually on the telephone or by Skype. I lived in London with my mother. My father was away in the professional army. And when World War II broke out in 1939, we were doing fine until 1941 when London was bombed. Ripe old age of 4 years old. It was really difficult. It was one of the defining moments, I think, of my life. The children in London had to be evacuated out of London. Luckily for us, we had our grandparents who lived in Cornwall, which is southwest part of England. My mother put us on a train in charge of the guard to the Cornwall, 365 miles away. We stayed there until 1945. The end of the war, and we had a wonderful childhood down there. It was a great place to be, especially since you came from a city that was in chaos. I wanted to be a missionary, and that stayed with me, I think, through my high school, grammar school years, when I decided, no, I want to be an airline stewardess and travel the world. And I had that bug in my bonnet to travel the world. When I got out of school, I decided to start my world travel. It was when I was 14. I don't know if I'm supposed to tell fibs on this thing, but anyway, I went to Woolworths. Wow. And that was my first job. I was very excited. I thought, oh, good, I'm going to work in the card department to help people get birthday cards and Christmas cards and all that. I was very thrilled. And they asked me when they interviewed how old was I, and I told them I was 16. I was 14. They put me to work in the nuts and bolts department. There were like 5 million different kinds of nuts and bolts, and I didn't know what. And people were coming in asking for them, and I didn't know what one bolt from the other. When I got out of school, I worked for the government. At that time it was called the GPO, and basically it was in the accounting department of the telephone company, which it was run by the government over there. And I asked when could I get my next promotion, and they told me when I was 23. I think I was 17 and a half. I said, oh, that's it, I can't stay here till I'm 23. I'm going to have to just move on. I was, I think, 17 when I decided to leave England. Okay, the way for me to get the start on our travels, for all of us girls we talked about, was to go to Canada first. Because at that time, Canada was a new country. It was a colony of England, and they were looking for young people to immigrate there. And we went to the Canadian Embassy, all of us. They said they would pay half of our fare on the boat to go across the Atlantic. I saved up £40, which is about $60, I should be correct. As the time went on, the girls all found they couldn't go that year, and the last boat to leave England for the winter was in October. And so I said, well, I'm going. Anyway, I booked my fare and got on this boat and crossed the Atlantic. It was to Quebec. I got out of Quebec and got the night train to Toronto. Quite a way, arrived the next morning, you know. The reason I headed for Toronto is because it was an English settled city. It was mostly English people there. It's because I was just an adventurous kind of person. I wanted to do everything, see the world, and I really couldn't do it there. I wasn't a bit scared, and I was very healthy, and I was willing to do any jobs and learn fast. Got to Toronto, and that's when I got my awakening. Before I left England, I had called the YWCA to see if I could stay there till I got myself situated. And they said they didn't take reservations. So come, and if they had a room, I could stay. So I went there, and they had no rooms. And the woman, and there I was standing there with this huge trunk with no rooms. And the woman said to me, well, there is another young lady. We'll ask if you could share her room for tonight, and we'll see what can be done tomorrow. So that's what I did. I went to the British Embassy, told them what happened, and I had nowhere to stay, and I was looking for a job. They got me an interview with the Royal Bank of Canada, because I had worked in government office. I went there, got the job, started the following Monday, and was told I was going to get paid every 2 weeks, which I figured, oh, could my money last 2 weeks? Found out then that at the end of 2 weeks, they held the first 2 weeks' pay. I went hungry for a few days and I didn't have any food. And the British Embassy had hooked me up with a young couple who had a little child who took in young immigrant people temporarily to stay at their home. I went into a small apartment with another immigrant girl we shared. I loved Canada. I loved working at the bank, the Royal Bank of Canada. There was a lot of young people working there. I did find that when I left, I was very emotional. I didn't think I would be because I was so excited.
Right.
I started thinking about how I should be worried maybe. And I got emotional. I was leaving my family. The most difficult thing arriving was the initial getting settled. I didn't realize, I didn't even think about it, that I didn't have any place to stay, or I didn't have a job, or I didn't have much money.
Right.
I never worried about anything when I was 19. I thought, I can do it. But my mother did tell me before I left England that, you know, Avril, we're letting you go because you really want to go. We're not stopping you. But if you ever get into any trouble or you want to come back to England, we can't send you the money. We don't have that kind of money to send to you to come back. I knew I couldn't go back. I had to go forward. And that was it. All right, during World War II, and we lived next door to a dairy where they delivered milk really early in the morning to everybody's homes. My father was away at the war, and my mother was working in an arms factory, manufacturing arms for the war effort. What she used to do in the evening, put my sister and I in a bed down on the first floor of our house, our apartment. There was a door naturally to get into the room. What happened that night, we were sleeping, a bomb dropped, not on our house but across the street. But because it was such a large bomb, it destroyed our house too. And it blew in all the windows and doors and the floors up. If you looked at pictures of bomb sites, that's what it looked like. The bomb site, the ceiling, you could see the sky. When it happened, evidently the door blew off to the room and blew over the bed and covered me. I was buried under the door and all the bricks of the house fell on top of the door. It really saved me from those bricks. But I couldn't move, I couldn't get out. I was just buried there. I could hear was my sister screaming. So I started screaming. But the dairy people in the dairy next door working, they knew what had happened because it happened to them too. And they came over and dug us out of there. I looked at my sister. She was covered in blood. The only reason is that the glass of the window had blown in and she had little bits of glass in her. I always remember a milkman came in with 2 small bottles of milk, sat us down on a pile of rocks right in the middle of the same room that we bombed out. Gave 1 bottle to me, 1 bottle to my sister, and says, "You two sit there and shut up. People are dying outside." I was 17 years old when I went there. I was living with a friend of mine, another girl, who shared an apartment together. We got paid every Friday, and on Thursday night we were broke. We'd pull all our change. We'd empty our purses, our pockets, everything, and see how much change we had together. We'd go out to the cartoon movie house. And coming out of the movie house after it was over, we were laughing about the show. I bumped into Graham. He was walking along the road with a friend. They started kidding us about and saying, "Hi, what are you doing?" And you know how guys do with girls. And it ended up, he ended taking us home. We just stood outside and talked a while. And I agreed that I would write to him if he wrote to me. Not really expecting him to, because he was in uniform. Here he is, a GI, right? I got a letter from him a month later. And in the very first letter, that was one of maybe 400 letters I got from him in the next year. He said, and I still have it, I read it again last night.
Oh.
It said, who knows, we may even get married. Can you see yourself married to a GI? That's what I considered his real proposal, because he never bent down on his knee and proposed or any of that. For some reason I stopped writing, and then one day I was visiting with my mother, and she said, do you still write to that nice young man you showed me his letters? I said, no, I don't write to him anymore. She said, well, you should write to him. He seemed very nice. So I wrote to him, and we started writing again. I was working and planning on traveling to Canada. Right? He told me that he felt that he couldn't ask me not to go. He didn't ask me not to go, so I went. Didn't realize we were that serious until we were parted and writing all these letters. We really fell in love through the letters, I think. That's how we got to know each other.
That's awesome.
Oh, I get a call from the customs office. The police come down there. They had a package for me, a small box, and then it was an engagement ring. They wanted me to pay $1,000 entry fee on it. Well, I didn't have $1,000, so I said, I'm sorry, I can't. He said, well, we're going to have to send it back to him then. So they sent it back to him. And I told him why I didn't have the money to pay for the customs duty. Then I came down and we got married. He thought he was going to be out of the service when he got home. However, he got home a day earlier than he was supposed to. So they reassigned him. They gave him 30-day leave and they reassigned him. So we thought, oh wow, we better get married in the 30 days. So then I could go with him. So that's exactly what we did. I was 19 at that time. And I had to write to England to my parents to have permission to get married because I was underage. And I had to give it to the church. We got married on my 20th birthday.
Oh.
We've been married ever since. It's been 63 years this year.
Wow.
Every time we have a little tiff during our marriage, I'd say, do you know, you stopped me from going around the world. And if you don't behave, I'm going to continue that trip.
In 2016, my grandpa suffered multiple strokes within 2 to 3 weeks of each other. The initial effects were loss of mobility, loss of communication, and his short-term memory. Over time, most of his mobility came back, but unfortunately, his ability to communicate more than 2 to 3 words has suffered a loss. Most people don't realize the severity of a stroke not only affects the individual, but their family as well. It's hard to see someone you love go through something so unpredictable, but the beauty of it all is having someone stand by your side within sickness and in health. And that's exactly what my grandma's doing. My grandparents have been married for 63 years. She survived a battle when she was 4 years old, and now she's helping my grandpa fight his daily battle.